Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMorty, and I'm still a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. My guest this week is Iain Moggach. Iain is very near and dear to my heart because he is the artistic director of Theatre by the Bay. I mean, he's near and dear to my heart because he's a wonderful friend, and I really, really enjoy spending time with him and all the incredible things he's doing. He's a great person, but he's near and dear to my heart because of his job as artistic director at Theatre by the Bay. Theatre by the Bay is an incredible theatre company up in Barrie, Ontario, and I have been very privileged to be a part of two of their productions this summer and the summer prior through the Simcoe County Theatre Festival that Theatre by the Bay puts on. Iain is an incredible human being. He's an award-winning director, producer, actor, theatre educator. He is just incredible. And I am so excited that he took some time out of his very, very busy life doing these wonderful multi-hyphenate things that he does to share his story. And for those of you who don't know, we touch on what actually an artistic director is. And I think this is so important because we did not go to theater school. We don't know what these people do in the artistic creative world, especially the theater world. So we touched on what actually he does. And there is an incredible production coming out right around the airing of this episode that he is involved in. It's called Iceman. Everyone go check it out. Go on up to the Barrie area. It's really easy to get up to Barrie from Toronto, folks. You just get on the GO train from Union and you're literally right there. It's not that far away. And it's a beautiful time of year to spend up near the lake. So head on up. Please support Theatre by the Bay. They are so near and dear to my heart. They were the way of getting back into the theater world for me, and I love them very, very much. And please enjoy the incredible Iain Moggach. Was the opening of Bobby.
It was great. Yeah, a really wonderful response from people. I mean, you know, the Jewish community really came out for it. You know, in terms of both sponsoring the show, but just their enthusiasm for the project last night was infectious. And yeah, there were great speeches after. Like Bobby Rosenfeld's niece was there, said a few words. Yeah. I mean, you know, that's really one of the powerful things about what we do, right? Is like, because it's local stories, it's like in some cases those people are alive or their family members are alive. And so opportunities like that just really make a show feel bigger than a show. It's a community event, you know, and that's awesome and brings really cool moments.
Absolutely. And I think what's really neat about it all, I think so often especially people who are big theater people, they always think of theater as like, you know, going to see Hamilton or a big Mervish production, which is so fabulous and great. But there's such that divide between like the stage and the audience. And to have kind of like I think also the Five Points Theater is very cool in the fact that you feel like you're right there immersed with the artist. But to have something like that building community and it just almost being like interactive because you know these people their families are still alive. Like that just really, I think, it broadens the definition and people's experiences with theater, I think, in the past, which is so cool.
Oh, absolutely. So, you know, the whole way this came about was because when I first got involved with the company, we were doing a lot of surveying because Theatre by the Bay was feeling kind of lost. We didn't really know what way to go. So we did all these surveys and we kind of uncovered two major takeaways. The first was that people came out to see shows because they had some familiarity with the material and they came out because they knew someone involved. So, you know, so in terms of that, it was like, okay, well, you know, that means you can go kind of one of two ways. Either you do mainstream popular stuff, but the other way is to do stuff that's incredibly specific to your audience that they may have some familiarity with or about or have thought about or whatever, right? So like, for instance, Bobby Rosenfeld, like those who know who she is are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing a show about her. And then those who don't come to see the show and they go, she was from Barrie? Like, how did I never hear about this person? So, and that really carved the path forward, and I think made us really unique. So yeah, like, you know, in terms of audiences in Simcoe County, they can go down to Toronto to go see Hamilton. They can go see, you know, some of the best Shakespeare in the world 2 hours away or whatever. So what can we offer? Well, what we can offer is shows about people like Bobby, Mary O'Brien with Mary of Shanty Bay, and then do other things that sort of foster the community, help support local artists that are living in the area, like the Simcoe County Theatre Festival. And that's sort of where we live, and it's a great lane to be in. Yeah.
So tell me your story. How did you wind up where you are here and now with Theatre by the Bay?
Sure. So, like many people, I was a theater kid. You know, I was acting since I was in kindergarten. You know, I had my first sort of big show when I was 11. It was that show. It was King John. I was Prince Arthur in Shakespeare's King John. And you know, basically that show was like, okay, I'm going to be in theater forever. So, you know, I went to the arts high school in Ottawa called Canterbury. You know, I did a degree at Carleton in history because I tried to like get out, but then theater was just what I needed to do. And then as soon as I started doing it again, it was like my soul clicked back into place. So I went to George Brown Theatre School. And then in my third year at George Brown, this guy named Alex Doe, who was the artistic director of Theatre by the Bay at the time, came into our business of acting class. And he was like, hey, I'm launching this program called the Indie Producer Co-op, which is specifically for George Brown graduating students. And basically, it's a 6-week intensive in theater producing where you'll come up to Barrie and help us produce a show and learn, and we'll have guest instructors and stuff. So I knew arts leadership was something that I wanted to do eventually. Like artistic director was on the horizon for me. So I was like, this is the program. You know, I have to do it. There's no other choice. Like this is destiny knocking at the door. So I applied. Of course, I got into the program and I came to Barrie for the first time. I'd never been to Barrie before. And we were working on this show called The 9 Mile Portage, which was like a walking tour show along the bay. It was Theatre by the Bay's like first ever local story production. You know, and there were like sailboats on the water, and I was like by the water every day, and was like, oh my gosh, this place is awesome. So once the co-op was done, you know, I told Alex, like, if you ever need anything, I'm your guy. And within a few weeks, he offered me an associate producer job on a show that they were doing. But then through some sort of crazy circumstances, shall we say, they ended up needing someone to actually be the general manager of the company. So I was at this wedding and I get this phone call from Alex being like, hey, do you want to move up to Barrie and be the general manager? And I was like, oh my gosh. So I was like shaking at this, you know, reception at the wedding. Anyway, so I took some time to think about it, but I felt, you know, I knew arts management was the way I wanted to go eventually, but obviously the universe is saying it has to be now, like get into it now kind of thing. So I did. I moved up to Barrie, and I've been at the top of the company in various different sort of capacities, basically ever since. And then when Alex stepped down from being artistic director in 2018, I became artistic director, and that's the job that I have now.
For people who don't know, what is an artistic director?
That's a great question. So the artistic director, it kind of depends on the size of the company, but in theory and sort of in generality, I suppose, the artistic director is the person who determines the artistic programming for the company, is often involved. So that means like choosing the shows, hiring playwrights to write shows for future seasons, like all that kind of stuff. But then is also often quite involved in hiring. So, you know, choosing the directors, the designers on projects, that sort of thing. And then often they'll be creatively involved in the season themselves. So typically as a director. And that's kind of what I do. But, on top of that, again, depending on the size of the company, they can do everything from being involved in fundraising and grant writing and, daily operations according to their need. And Theater by the Bay is by like not a large company by any means. So I'm very much involved in every aspect of the company, which is fine. I like that. I like writing grants for the most part. I like writing grants. I don't mind fundraising. I love marketing. So like having my hands in all that kind of stuff is great. But then also they're responsible for sort of choosing the direction. Like, what is the company 5 years from now? What do we want to look like? What sort of art do we want to make? And those conversations I find really, really fun. So that's kind of an overview of the sort of things that I do.
So take me back to your choices and your mindset. You said such a wonderful thing about like your soul, what was fed your soul. The mindset from like arts high school to Carleton to then saying, I need to do theater. What was going on?
Well, so, I'd done this arts high school intensive program in theater, and I loved it. But I guess, I don't know, there was that part of me that was like, should I be a bit more practical? Like, both my parents are teachers. My dad's a professor. And, I could have, at the time, I saw myself potentially going that sort of direction as well. I've always had a strong passion for history and political science and philosophy and like English, like read. I was an avid reader. So those sorts of things interested me. So I thought I would go that way, but I don't know. Just the draw of theater just ended up being too much, and it really felt like, there was part of myself missing without it. But fortunately, the program that I went into at Carleton, which was the College of Humanities, which ended up being it was this 4-year program that kind of touched on everything. So like I've read the whole Bible, I've read the Bhagavad Gita, I've read Dante, all of Dante. I've read, like Plato. I've read all these things that most people never get to engage with at all. I got the chance to do. So when I went to theater school, and George Brown was very classical in its training, there'd be all these references to things and be like, oh, yeah, I know that. I know that. So it has been infused into what I've done. I haven't lost by any means the learning that I did there, but it's just that I'm applying it to art and to self-expression, and that even just, and also just the ability to write an essay is very helpful in arts management. How to craft a sentence, how to end a paragraph, how to convey an idea, how to read text, like a text more than once and know how to kind of critically analyze it. All those things I learned from Carleton and I apply to my daily life. So certainly not lost time, but everything's aligned now, which is what you want in life. So
totally. And do you think because there's so much of what Theater by the Bay does that is like not just like here's some historical work, like here's parts of our history, but it's like, do you think that comes a lot from you and what you enjoy? Because there's so much joy in what you're bringing to Theater by the Bay, and it's also historical. There's kind of this lovely, it's exciting, but it's also like, hey, we're also getting a history lesson here.
I mean, the Alex, the former AD, was the same. He also was a huge history buff. But in terms of, and also, I don't know, I guess on some level, it's a little bit easier to do local stories if you're drawing from something that's already happened as opposed to making things up from scratch entirely. But that said, so certainly that. But I also love the contemporary things. Like this is a very historical season this year, but next year it's 2 very contemporary, completely original shows. But you know, also if you look at some of the productions that I have done and will be doing, it's very political, so I don't know. There's that influence in there as well.
Yeah. Now, when you were at George Brown, was there, or any time in your life, I should say, was there ever a thought of saying, okay, I love the acting part, and that's solely what I want to focus? Or how did you figure out that you wanted to do more arts management, or was it always there?
I mean, it's kind of a funny story. I mean, George Brown was a straight up acting program. There was no room or time for anything else in theory. But on the first day at George Brown, you know, when we all go to the bar after a first day, one of my classmates comes up to me and she's like, I have a theory about you. And I was like, okay. And she was like, you're a director, aren't you? And I was like, how did you know? She was like, I just know. I just got all vibed with you right away that you're more than just an actor. And I was like, yeah, actually, ironically enough, I've done like increasingly more directing and less acting before I came here. But yeah, I want to do both. So yeah. And then also I was crazy. Like in second year at George Brown, one of my really, really good friends asked me to direct a show that he was working on with a friend of his while I was studying full time at George Brown. So I would finish George Brown and then go and direct at night. And it was bananas, totally bananas. But it was awesome. And I got to flex that muscle and apply some of the things that I'd been learning, which was great. But then also in our third year, one of our teachers, Jeanette, she caught on to the fact that I would be a good director. And so she kind of built a role for me in one of our grad shows that she was directing to be basically like the assistant director, just under a slightly different name, because she couldn't have that without, like, I don't know, equity probably being.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever. So I ended up kind of assistant directing one of the grad shows at George Brown in third year, which was. But yeah, you know, I love acting. I do. But I don't know. As I've gotten older, I feel like it's nice to have the job done at opening night, and then I just kind of enjoy. So that's
right. Now, what is it about theater that draws you so much, and not so much film and television? Was there a decision to go one path or the other?
Oh, good question. I don't know if it was ever. I don't know. I think. I've been a theater kid my whole life, certainly. So it's where I've invested a lot of my creative life and imagination. So I haven't really thought too much about film and TV, to be honest. But I don't know. I mean, from my perspective, just the ability, like the fact that theater is live and in the moment, the fact that, you know, the actors can be finding things all the way past closing night in some cases, you know, I think all that stuff is really special about it. I love that theater is something that is transient. Like, you got to see it while it's up, you know, or potentially you may never see it. Like, there's something kind of magical and beautiful in that. I mean, who knows? Maybe one day I might get into TV and film, and certainly, you know, the way, like, Canadian theater's in a bit of a rough shape, so probably having the flexibility to be engaged in multiple industries is probably healthier for one's career right now. But I don't know. It's where my when I you know, read a book, when I, you know, look at an art, when I hear a news story, when I engage with people, it's just, how could this be a play is the first thing that kind of comes to my mind. And I don't know. So I think that tells me I'm in the right lane right now.
Yeah. What I know this is such a loaded question, but like, what is it about theater that really feeds your soul? Like, what is it?
I don't know. I mean, when I think of those early days, you know, like in high school, even before then, just the fact that it's a group of people who may not know each other very well, who come from all different, lives and stories, coming together to make something that's, in our case, with Theatre by the Bay, never happened before, that there's no roadmap for, per se, beyond kind of just best practices. It's really, and you have no idea even up to opening night how people are going to take it. Like, I think it's one of the most powerful art forms in the world in that respect. And, certainly because of like all of the increasing digitalization, which has its pros, but I think it's the community that fosters that liveness, I think, is really intangible. And I don't know, potentially could also protect us in this AI age. It's like you literally can't digitize an actor on the stage going through something in the moment. So I don't know, all those things are very powerful to me and keep me going.
Totally. Oh my gosh. I just remember I had a conversation with someone about that exact thing who came to see my show at the Simcoe County Theatre Festival this year, and she hadn't been to the theatre in forever. And it was one of those things where you're like, okay, fine, Janet will come see your show, right? And she said something very similar. Like there's nothing, she'd forgotten the experience of sitting in the audience watching someone on stage. And she's like, I kind of was taken out of it a bit because I kept forgetting that I wasn't watching a TV show that I was streaming in my basement, that I could just press pause, and that these were actual people like sweating and laughing and, doing this for me on stage. And she's like, it's so visceral. And I was like, yeah, it's anthropologically what we're meant to be doing, right? As people passing on stories in our lives. And I think there's no way that AI will ever take that away from us because we need it so much as humans.
And I think, there's the potential that we'll need it even more as we increase it. But I will also say, we just opened Bobby last night, and the experience of watching, Bobby Rosenfeld's niece watch the show, there's nothing like that, watching a family member, experience an actor's take on their someone who they knew so well and grew up with. It's really, that can't be captured when you're watching a Netflix documentary at home,
No. Ugh. And so to touch a bit on the Simcoe County Theatre Festival, I've been involved the past 2 years. And what struck me so much last year, and again this year, of course, but last year being the first, was me still being fairly new to this industry. I had never had the chance to actually speak to the person who wrote the words that I was saying. And so I was in Megan's play, and having Megan Adam come up to me with tears streaming down her face, being like, I can't believe I'm seeing what literally her blood, sweat, and tears and soul is on this page now coming to life. And she's like, I'll never forget that moment. It just struck me to be like, I am saying these words that you wrote. All these auditions that I do and the film and TV stuff is wonderful. But here's the literal playwright that I can talk to, and she sees that on the stage. What? That is just it sounds so corny. What a blessing, right? What a joy.
The whole Simcoe County Theatre Festival came about because when I did move to Barrie in 2015, I was like, okay, where are the indie theaters? Because that's what I'm from. That was when I was from. I was like, where's the indie theaters? Oh, there aren't any? Okay, well, where's the Fringe Festival? Oh, there isn't one? The whole county. Basically, as soon as I became artistic director and I was building kind of the first 5-year plan the company had ever had, one of the things where I was like, we've got to get a festival going for emerging theater makers. So people like yourself, diving into this industry, people like Megan writing her first one of her first full-length plays. Like, these are the kinds of things that this community needs to bridge that gap. Because when I got here, there was like, you could get potentially hired by Theatre by the Bay, potentially hired by Talk is Free, or you did community theater, which doesn't pay at all, So then there's nothing in between that. And then, of course, on top of that, it's like, we love the 5 Points Theater, but it's prohibitively expensive for any kind of startup company. The City of Barrie's granting program, which is one of the only ones in the area, their granting program just doesn't have the capacity to support new companies coming up. So it was kind of like, this is exactly what we needed. And I made it my mission to get this festival off the ground for moments like that to happen. For those kinds of connections. And did you know Megan before?
Nope.
Exactly. Like, you, Janet, Aurelia, and Megan from Barrie, like, coming together for the first time ever to make something, and now you're connected, you're friends. Like, it's great. I love it. I love it so much, and I think it's one of my proudest accomplishments.
You should be so beyond proud. It made me and made others, I think, just so happy. Like, it was, and then something I'll always remember is that the Barrie Arts Awards this last year, there were a bunch of politicians there, as there always are, and somebody made some great comment about how, like, Barrie's not just a hockey town. And I was like, yes. I remember when I moved to Aurelia too, being like, where are the artists? Oh, here they are. They're in like a little hidden pocket. But once you find them, you're like, oh my gosh, look at all these people who, especially now that there's more and more people moving into Simcoe County, not everyone wants to play hockey and lacrosse, right? And people, I remember at the Arts Awards, this one man saying when he was growing up, he didn't feel like he had a place in Barrie because he wanted to do theater and he didn't want to play hockey. And that's what boys did. It just struck me so much. So what you're building, like, it's just going to grow and grow and grow, and then have the space for people to grow with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's a puzzle piece we've been needing for a long, long time. And I can't wait to see where it grows. Like, who knows? Why does it have to be in Barrie? Could it not rotate to different cities in Simcoe County every year? Like let's get people out. We should, and or potentially tour them. Like, we do a week in Barrie, a week at the Opera House in Aurelia, a week in the Midland Culture. Like, the potential for it is limitless. It just needed to start. And now it's started.
Yeah. Since coming into more of an arts management theater space, has there been anything that has surprised you just about this industry in general?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest thing is just there is way less money like across the board that people can possibly imagine. It's a way, way harder for companies to grow than you would ever expect. It's really, really challenging. I mean, with like the Ontario Arts Council, for instance, like, their maximum project grant is $20,000. The average Theatre by the Bay production is like $80,000 to $120,000, depending on the size of the show. That's like a fifth of the whole show comes with the main government source to support the arts in our province. So, and then that's not including like the staff. That's not including like office expenses and stuff. So yeah, I think that's been a real shock to the system, where it's just there. And as a result of that sort of limited financial capacity across the board, you've got to be laser focused with their priorities. Otherwise, you will just be dismissed right off the bat. And that's tough because, a project may come along that makes sense to us, but just doesn't make sense, like our community, but may not make sense in the broader scheme of things. And there's no room for that kind of synergy, if that makes sense. So that's probably been one of the hardest lessons. Yeah, and it's led to some pretty challenging times for the company over the years that I've been here. But and we've kind of gotten over that. We've gotten better at proving how, a production about whatever the ice industry in Barrie has national significance and stuff. But it's those were there were some kicks in the pants in the early years to be like, oh my God, this is so much harder to get money than I thought it was. So but that's just time and experience teaching.
Yeah. Do you think it's because, and the reason why this is on the forefront of my brain is because the podcast episode that just released today, the gentleman who I was speaking to, we were talking a lot about the importance of art in our culture and how sometimes we feel that what we're doing is not important, compared to practice medicine, right? And he was very much art is the most important thing. It's literally the only thing for legacy that we have, is the storytelling that we pass on through our generations, whether or not it's, Bobby, Iceman, stuff like that, or, me passing down a story to my little niece about what I did for breakfast the other day. And do you feel like there's been a change at all in your time where, at least for me, it feels like everything, the first thing to get cut in everything, schools, the government, is the arts, right? Because it's seen as frivolous and as other, when really I think it is, of course, things like housing and healthcare, those are important, but what pushes legacy on as a culture is the art.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would just sort of add that I think it's more about the fact that governments need tangible results. They need a hospital wing because hospital wings do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Meanwhile, the impact of art, for the most part, is intangible.
Yeah.
Where it's
great point.
How do you, for a youth getting involved in an acting class and discovering who they are? Lovely, feel-good story, but not a tangible impact measure that the government can report in the next election.
Like a number stat.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I think that's part of the problem.
Right.
And so it really just comes down to the community. But, that said, if you collect enough of those stories and if you can get enough people rallied around the case for the arts, then governments do listen to that. I'm reminded of when the city of Barrie tried to cancel the lease on the Georgian Theatre, which is one of the two theaters in town during the pandemic, as a cost-cutting measure. And the community impact, the community rallied around that case to the point that the CAO of the city had to apologize during a council meeting because they messed up so bad. So there's a case to be made, but it's just, I recognize the challenge. And there was a weird year, Janet. So the first year that Theatre by the Bay was nominated for Not-for-Profit of the Year, we were for the Barrie Business Awards. We were up against the hospice and Youth Haven. And I was embarrassed. I was like, oh God, I hope we don't win. If the hospice is up, the hospital company, it's and we win, it's that's front, that would not be a good look. I need to build that into my speech somehow, where it's thanks. I think the hospice.
I think I'll give the award to the hospice.
But that said, I the case that I make when people say the arts don't have value or whatever, is that I think that one of the things that the arts also has is that it's at the intersection of a lot of things that governments care, right? Mm-hmm. So it's with Theatre by the Bay, it's downtown activation. People are going to go for dinner before they see a show or go for a drink after. They're going to park, presumably. There's that part, which governments find important. Youth engagement and mental health, on a broad scale, that is something that they care about. So and the arts are really valuable in that. Like you mentioned, I think it was Josh in the Arts Awards who mentioned that he wasn't a hockey kid. He needed theater to, so those kinds of things are really, really important. tourism. Arts can be at the heart of tourism, which is another thing that governments care about. So it's kind of up to like arts managers to make that case, because those are taking these intangible results, and also just that art should have value in and of itself, like these kinds of things. But then putting it through the lens that makes sense to them, and that is a bit of an easier, more tangible sell.
Yeah, that's great points. Do you have any advice for anyone interested in either like going from acting to more of an arts management piece, or just anyone in general trying to get into this space?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing to say is that, and I've seen this across the board, this isn't just a me thing, like artistic directors and arts leaders will always make the time for a coffee or whatever if they can. So if there's a company that like you, like obviously do your research before you don't just scattershot email, like do your research. But if there are companies that you're interested in potentially getting involved with, and you have an interest in sort of arts management, like ask for a meeting. And 9 times out of 10, unless they're really busy or they're literally in rehearsal from 10 until 6 or whatever, they will make that time for you and answer questions. And that's a great way to kind of just get a sense of like, is this something that you're interested in? Is this a person that you could see yourself working for? That kind of thing. So I think that's always a great place to start. And start kind of doing some research into who is out there in your community, and I don't know, potentially shadow or stuff like that. There's also, like community theaters really are the foundation. Like a strong community theater community is the foundation of a healthy theater ecosystem. I really believe. And they're always looking for people to have support at upper levels. It's all volunteer driven, right? So if you just even want to dabble and potentially like support as a producer on a show, and learn if that's something you're interested in, reach out to your local community theaters and see if you can help out with that. Obviously, it wouldn't pay, but it could give you that chance to make something that you at the very least, hopefully being very proud of. And at the most, say, oh, this is actually something I want to do. And this community theater company has built all these guardrails in place to help me succeed in a way that if I tried to do it on my own, I wouldn't be able. So those are kinds of the two things I say.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Do you have any favorite moments from your time, not just in Theater by the Bay, but just in your theater career?
Oh, yeah. There's so many. There's so many. I mean, the first thing that I did out of school was a production of Romeo and Juliet that we did at a brewery in Port Perry. And it was myself and all these classmates that we just got together, and like we reversed in the project lead Landon Doak, like his like condo's party room or whatever. We just rehearsed there, and it was such a fun experience. The whole process was, and we ended up like selling out like the entire run. It was just this magical moment and this real launch that really fueled me. I think that's cool though. But on the Theater by the Bay side, the story I bring up is, so we did this show called the Cenotaph Project, and this kind of ties into a little bit to my earlier story about like community back. But we did the show called the Cenotaph Project, where we worked with several Eastview secondary school students to research names on the cenotaph and develop scenes and monologues, that kind of thing. And then we handed all that raw material to a local playwright, Danielle Joy Kostrich, who kind of built a show out of it and infused her own kind of thing into that. So the run of the show happens, and we cast some of those Eastview kids that were involved in the development in the show, so they got to see it all the way through. It's really cool. On the last, and so in one of the sort of subplots of the show was that one of these students wanted to research the sister of one of the soldiers on the cenotaph instead of the person on the cenotaph. And in their sort of magical scene, this character creates this scene where the sister gets to have a chat with her brother who died in the war and tell her all about all the amazing things that happened in her life that he unfortunately had to miss out on, of course, because he died overseas. So the actor who played that student, who was one of these Eastview students, did some research and it found out that the actual real sister person was still alive. So we invited her to the show for the closing performance. And so this real person got to see this scene between herself, played by this young actress, and like her brother who really died overseas, in this magical moment where she got to tell him all the amazing things that happened to her life. There was not a dry eye in the house.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Yeah. It was remarkable. Like, we could barely hold it together. And you know, it really drives home what we do as a what we're capable of doing as a company, and changed those young kids' life. Like, it was their first professional show, and like, what a show.
Oh my
They built
God.
it from an idea all the way to that, and they did all this research, you know, and were just so deep, poured all their hearts and souls into it, and it was so clear on stage. And yeah, it was really really magical.
Oh, that is so incredible. Again, the power of theater. Holy crow. Like, to be able to, again, viscerally see that and like connect with the real person. Oh my God. Look at the goosebumps. That's insane. I don't think there's nothing else that could do that. Nothing.
No, not in the same way. No.
Cool.
Yeah, it was really, and then the energy in the room, like, it was just, it was really, really, really powerful. Really powerful. Yeah, I'll never, ever forget that. No. Never.
Is there anything that you're looking forward to coming up?
Oh, yeah, so much I'm looking forward to. So, our next big project is Ice.
Mm-hmm.
This was actually a silver lining of the pandemic, how this all came about. So Vern Thiessen, who's the playwright, he's a Governor General's award-winning playwright, which is one of the highest honors a Canadian artist can receive. You know, we got all this educational funding in March of 2020. Like, our biggest grant ever was to support developing educational program for Simcoe County Arts. Anyway, but then the pandemic happened, and everything had to go online. And the great part of that was that suddenly everyone in Canada was an option to teach, and everyone was available because everyone lost their job. So we emailed Vern, and I was like, hey, do you want to do a workshop with us? And he said, yeah, absolutely. He had never heard of us before. He didn't know what we did or whatever. But he did a playwriting workshop, and we kind of kept in touch. And then, you know, at one point during a Zoom call, he was like, you know, Ian, one of these days I'm going to have to write a play about Simcoe County. And I was like, Vern, like, what are you talking about? Like, we could never afford, like, don't play with my heart like that. And he was like, no, you know, it's not really like about that so much, you know, like, I really think what Theatre by the Bay is doing is really special, and I'd love to work with you guys on some. So I was like, holy crap. So I sent him my big list of ideas, because I have this big list of all ideas. So I sent him this big list, and he was like, and I had the title Iceman. I had that like locked in from even before I talked to Bull. And he was like, oh, I like this Iceman idea. So that we got chatting, and this idea of, like, you know, a show set in the Depression, just as artificial refrigeration was starting to take over jobs. You know, like this, like, it all kind of clicked into this very modern, contemporary way. And then that's that. That was, you know, 2-3 years ago that all happened, and it's almost here, and I get to direct it. I've been a fan of Vern's work since I was 16 years old. Like, I saw his production of Shakespeare's Will at Stratford, and it basically changed my mind about Canadian theater because I was such a snob. I was such a dork. But basically, at the time, I was like, a one-woman show about Shakespeare's wife by a Canadian playwright? Like, how good could this possibly be? And then I left and I was like, that's the best thing Stratford's ever done.
Oh,
So for that, that young Ian to be working on the world premiere of a show by Vern that he wrote for like my theater.
For you.
Yeah, is pretty special. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I don't know, if this is coming out while Bobby's running, but Bobby is great. It's really, really wonderful. So yeah, those are things.
When does Iceman come out?
November 1st to the 12th.
Got it. I'll put all the details in the show notes below. Do you have any final words of wisdom or advice?
Well, since this is since your podcast is about actors, I guess, stay curious, do research, really, like find out who's out there. Don't be afraid to introduce yourself. I love when actors submit them, this is probably bad to say, but I love when actors submit themselves instead of like through these massive agent listings where it's like this binder full of people that we have to go through, so I don't know, all those things are like, yeah, just get to know the company and that will help you a lot. And just keep exploring what your why is. Why does theater or film or whatever matter to you? And, hold on to that, because as we all know in this industry, there are days that are tough. There are periods that are tough. And it's really having a strong why and a love for it that transcends basically anything else that's going to keep you going. So that's what I'd say.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And thank you, Ian, for being my guest this week. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedule to share your story with me and with my listeners. His schedule is so busy because he's creating incredible art, folks. Please go check out Iceman and all the other incredible work that Theatre by the Bay and Ian, that they are doing up there in Barrie. And I say up there, it ain't very far away, folks. It's not far. You get on the GO train from Union and it takes you right to Barrie. Go support our local theatre productions, our local theatre groups. Do it, do it, do it. This is the art that we need to be creating in this world that is literally a dumpster fire. So thank you, Ian, for all the work that you're doing. I will get off my soapbox now. Can you all tell how much of a fan I am of this wonderful human being that you just listened to? He's amazing. I hope you will all tune in next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye.